Welcome back to the show, one and all.
Can't wait.
I am Ty. He is Dan. This is the Solid Verbal. Hit follow, hit subscribe wherever it is you find your podcast. You like to listen to pristine audio college football content. We will be here all season long, all year long. There is much to discuss on today's episode. We are going to have a brand new Verballer Top 12 poll, hot off the presses. We've also got a little bit of news that we need to share with the Verballer hood, just things going on in and around the world of college football. Leftover thoughts, of course, leftover thoughts on the spillover episode here from week 9. Got a little bit of a game suggested by the Verballer hood, and then we'll close things out with just a brief look ahead at the games that are on the slate. Now, as we push into November, Dan, things are going to get wild.
Yes, agree.
Maybe not so much this weekend, but things are going to get wild. It's going to come down to the wire in a bunch of these conferences. I have outlined a few things today in my spillover thoughts, my more like ruminations, let's say, that I've had since we did our recap episode, things that have been bouncing around up there that I am eager to talk about with you.
I'm always ready, Ty. Let me absorb the takes and dish them back Pong style.
So our Verballer Top 12 is out. We continue to have more votes than ever on this thing. And I was thinking maybe at some point, either this coming week or next, I'm gonna open it up to the entirety of the Verballer hood.
Wow.
Just 1 week only.
A special.
Yeah. Verballer Top 12 for week 10, though.
All right.
Number 12, Texas A&M.
Okay.
Number 11, Tennessee. Number 10, BYU. Number 9, Iowa State. 2 Big 12 teams. We've got number 7, Clemson. I botched this up. Hold on.
No, you're good.
12, 11, 10, 9. All right. Number 8, Clemson. Number 7, Indiana. Number 6, Texas. Number 5, Miami. 4, Ohio State. 3, Penn State. 2, Georgia. 1, your Oregon Ducks. Any reaction to any of that?
I personally would have Texas A&M in terms of the body of their work ahead of Tennessee. Is that crazy to you?
No.
Given their win against LSU, given a better loss than what Tennessee has this year with Arkansas, Texas A&M with Notre Dame, that loss has aged decently well. Obviously, Notre Dame has a blemish on its schedule they'd rather not have. Otherwise, I don't know. I'd hesitate to put Indiana ahead of Texas just because of Indiana's schedule right now, through no fault of their own, obviously taking care of business with or without Curtis Rourke.
Indiana is not ahead of Texas. Indiana is 7.
No, I'm saying I'd hesitate to put Indiana ahead of Texas.
Oh, my God.
If I were looking at this and looking at what I'd change. So I'm saying this is okay by me.
Yeah, well, so what I think the overarching takeaway is for me is how different this is from the AP Top 25.
Yes.
Indiana is number 13 in the AP poll. It's obviously much higher in ours. Notre Dame is 8 in ours. They are 13th. Or 8th in the AP, 13th in ours. Tennessee is much higher as well. Texas A&M is a couple spots higher in the AP than it is in the Verballer Top 12. Of course, none of these are actually right at this point. It's really a subjective measure. It doesn't count for anything. But it is interesting to compare and contrast because there are plenty of similarities, but then with respect, I think, to the teams outside of the top 5, that's where you start to see differences among the people voting. It does not surprise me that our Verballer hood, which of course has deep respect for teams like Iowa State and BYU and more recently Indiana, I don't doubt that there is any kind of Verballer bump going on with respect to those teams. So there are differences, and that was the main takeaway. Again, I don't read too deeply into polling as a whole, just worth pointing out here as we talk through the Verballer Top 12 for Week 10.
Okay, so my only note here is my continued contextual skepticism about Penn State. I think Penn State's a good team. I think Penn State is potentially a very good team because anytime you have what can be a dominant defense when healthy, that just lifts you pretty high in my book. I don't know that I don't know what the analogy is here. I don't know, like, does Penn State have a gear? Does Penn State have a throttle, right? When you're talking about a top 3, 4, 5-ish team, you want to point to something and say, and they don't have to have one of the best 3 offenses in America, something like that. but you want to point to a week where you're like, yeah, that's when they puffed their chest out as a top 3-4 team. Do you have that sense for Penn State this year? Has there been that throttle? Like, I don't feel like it was, obviously not Bowling Green. Don't feel like it was UCLA. Don't feel like it was Illinois. And now we've seen what, various, like what Oregon has played UCLA and Illinois, what that throttle looks like. And it seems Oregon's better than Penn State, so that's fine. That's my skepticism with Penn State given their ranking. Much better to be undefeated than not. Penn State is undefeated. Do you get the sense that there is that throttle within for Penn State?
Well, I mean, the throttle question's interesting. I mean,
because I see it with a lot of the teams around them.
Sure. They beat West Virginia very soundly, but that was week 1.
It's West Virginia.
West Virginia. Beat them very, very soundly. That's a game that comes to mind. I often reference the Illinois game, which was not necessarily the prettiest game. They won by 14 points, but that was one that felt like they won by, in my opinion, a much larger margin.
I know, but it's not a vibe scoreboard, Ty. It's a scoreboard. Yeah.
I understand. You could argue that the way that they were going against Wisconsin was very encouraging, and they maybe were getting closer to that next gear
right
that you bring up, because whether it was Drew Aller, Bo Prabula, one way or another, that game very much felt like it was teetering on the brink of Penn State cracking it open.
It's Halloween, though. Right? It's Halloween. We're 9 weeks into the season.
I get it.
Like, you can't lose a race and be like, hypothetically, though, that race went a lot better than people are going to realize afterwards. Like, okay, cool.
They may just not be that kind of team. It's been an interesting experiment this season with a new offense that I think has gradually come along, with a rushing attack that has definitely gotten more explosive, with a passing game that still leans a little too heavily on Tyler Warren, their playmaking tight end, and doesn't have go-to options out wide in the same way. Julian Fleming makes a big catch, has a bad drop. Harrison Wallace has gotten targets, has been good for the most part this season for Penn State. I think Drew Aller as a passer has certainly improved, and we have seen development on that front. But at the end of the day, it's not an explosive passing offense, not yet. And we'll see what that does against a team like an Ohio State this weekend. I have my assumptions. I need to dig into the data to form a deeper opinion on things. But this will be the game that should provide answers to all of the questions you desire.
I appreciate that. Like, if we are talking strictly about how good we think a team is Halloween week in conjunction with their record and obviously their resume, but what they've shown lately these past few weeks, it almost seems like there's a case for Texas A&M as like a top 5, 6, 7 team, right? Like, they didn't fully separate from Mississippi State, but their performance against LSU, certainly their performance taking care of business against Mizzou a few weeks ago, and it was a different Mizzou team that played Alabama. I know they've struggled of late, but there is something about Texas A&M, and they beat Arkansas, which is something Tennessee can't say. And it wasn't a big win. It was, 4 or 5 points. But if we're just in a vacuum looking at where teams are right now, I think I might take Texas A&M against Iowa State. I think I would take them against BYU in this moment. I know I'm going to be accused of disrespecting the Big 12 and BYU and Iowa State, but with how they're performing right now, I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that we should be a little bit more fluid with how we think about this top 12.
It's a good defense at A&M.
Yeah.
There's no denying it's a good defense, and I think the defense is still the most consistent part of the team as they're trying to get a little bit more consistency on the offensive side of the ball.
Definitely.
And it just so happens that the Marcel Reed thing worked out. I don't know if you saw some of the post-game comments from the LSU side pretty much indicating that they had not prepared for Marcel Reed. If it looked like they didn't have an answer, it's because they quite literally did not.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they've got options like that they can bring in a pinch to try and get things going. In this case, Marcel Reed absolutely provided a spark that makes him dangerous. And I think Mike Elko is a hell of a coach. He's already shown that he can make this team better over the course of a season. So I would probably be a little bit more bullish on A&M than our poll here, which has them all the way down at 12.
Yeah.
By the way, just for reference, Notre Dame at 13, Bama at 14, Boise at 15, Pitt at 16 right now. So obviously, Notre Dame is a team that, just by virtue of others losing, will find its way into our top 12, I think, before the end of the season, provided they don't drop a game. Boise State Boise State's got, I think, a pretty clear path at this point now that they cleared the UNLV hurdle.
Agree.
To get back into that Mountain West Championship game, most likely against UNLV again. They will continue to move up a little bit, I think, in this poll. And Pitt has a chance to really jump up this week. Pitt and SMU play on Saturday night in a huge game with ACC relevance. Depending on who wins that game, I would expect them to maybe jump up on the fringes of the top 12, if not push somebody else out. But as I said at the top, and I mean it,
yeah.
Now as we get into November, it's going to get weird. It's going to get weird.
You're not going to like me saying it, Ty, but there is a team with a throttle that's not here, and that's Notre Dame. What Notre Dame has done lately is, whether or not Navy ends up ranked by the end of the year, they're going to end up with a very good record, and they beat them by, if my state college math works out here, it's 37 points away from home, not in a full road environment, but away from home, they win by 37. They beat Georgia Tech and their backup quarterback. Yes, that was a Zach Pyron, Georgia Tech. That's 18 points. Stanford by 42. A decent Louisville team by a touchdown. Comfortably beat Miami of Ohio. Beat Purdue by 59 points.
Killed them.
We're right there with Northern Illinois. Right there, Ty. Laugh all you want. Notre Dame was in position to win that game, and the Texas A&M win has grown magnificently for the Irish. So, again, I like a throttle in my top 12 teams, and so I'd put them, 9, 10, 11 in there.
They have gotten better. They absolutely have gotten better. So if you want to vote in the Verballer Top 12 poll, I'm not sure yet when I'll extend the invite out to the entirety of the Verballerhood. Probably either this weekend or next. Just to play it safe, going out to verballers.com. Sign up as a certified or premium Verballer. Support what Dan and I do.
Yes.
Be much appreciated. Of course, if you sign up, you'll have an opportunity to vote in this poll every week, not just the one-offs. We do have a little bit of news, not a whole lot, but Ted Roof is out at UCF.
Man.
The leaky roof is still leaky. I believe I called that one, didn't I?
Well, yeah. I mean, anybody who's watched the sport in the last 17 to 23 years could have seen
there
where
were
this
still
was
people
going.
trying to justify it.
Okay.
There were. People were trying to justify it. I talked about this at some point or another. People who write preview publications, things of that nature, if you're not looking to be overly critical, you are trying to find the bright side of why. What is the logic behind a move like this? Somebody who's been around college football and I think is pretty well established at this point. And so, again, he was supposed to have a better rushing defense. UCF had a terrible rushing defense. Let's install Ted Roof and see if he can make it. It never worked.
The rush defense is okay. Yeah, I think it's like the pass that struggled this year, right?
But you can't just coach one half of the defense.
I agree.
You can't coach one half of it, even if it's better against the run and then people are torching you through the air.
Right.
UCF has fallen on hard times now the last couple of weeks. They've lost however many straight games, 4 or 5 games. It has not been a good campaign back half of the season thus far for Gus Malzahn. So it doesn't surprise me that he'd be dismissed. Frankly, I'm surprised he was hired at all. He is now out at UCF. We did see another move. Mike Bloomgren fired from the Rice Owls. That'll be one that is going to resonate, I think, with our Discord community, given their proclivity towards all things Owls, be it Rice or Kennesaw, who is the Cheez-It National Team of the Week, mind you.
Or Temple, who is not the Cheez-It National Team of the Week. Yeah.
Very much not. So Bloomgren out. We have seen some coach firings over the last 2 weeks. None have been truly of epic proportion, big-time power conference names yet.
Right.
We will undoubtedly get those the deeper we get into this season, maybe before the end of the season, maybe not, but definitely before 2025 starts. No huge surprises here. Just need to make sure we clear the deck here and keep everybody informed with all things going on in and around the world of college football. Any other news on just like the Dan Rubenstein personal front? How's your elbow? How is life in Chicago? How's the weather? How's the pizza? And anything else we need to report in this bit?
No, not right. I'm preparing to meet you in Ann Arbor. I'm going to bring a cooler with some, the blue ice, the frozen goodies to keep your cheese for the cheese exchange.
Are we doing the cheese trade-off?
Yes, we are. I'm going to need an order of Cooper's Sharp White American cheese.
How much?
How much can you fit in your suitcase?
How would you suggest I transport the cheese?
I don't know. Do you have like a blue ice that you can just put next to it in your suitcase, in your bag, however you're traveling?
I could, and TSA isn't going to stop me with that?
With a block of cheese?
I don't know.
No, they will not. I've traveled with cheese on various airlines. I can tell you, unless you're bringing like molten hot queso, which could be interpreted as a liquid, you'll be fine bringing cheese on a plane.
Wow.
Where in the TSA guidelines do they mention anything about cheese?
I have no idea. I wouldn't even think to take cheese.
I mean, you can travel
along
with food,
me.
Ty.
I know you can, but we'll talk more about this later.
You might get a weird look, but you're not going to get.
I get those anyway. What difference does it make?
You're good. Yeah.
Cheese trade.
Cooper's
cheese trade
Sharp White American for future cheesesteaks that I would like to make.
We're going to talk about this later in the show. I'm going to make a note here.
Yeah, of course.
Shall we get to just a few of our leftover thoughts from week 9?
I would love to.
What's on your mind, Dan, other than cheese?
Rewatching all of UNLV Boise, I kind of can't believe UNLV lost that game, given how much better it seemed their offense was at times, that they were so much better at generating explosive plays for large chunks of that game, but couldn't finish drives. Obviously, the big interception that gave Boise a tiny field relatively early did not help. But I got more excited for a potential rematch between UNLV. UNLV, I don't think, has a great offensive line. I think if there's anything that I could point to, like, man, as good as Haj Malik Williams is, he was running a lot away from pressure. The speed of Colorado was striking, because I believe Cincinnati to be a pretty good Big 12 team, and the speed that Colorado has, especially on the outside on offense and in their pass rush, was striking to me. That was something. What else did I go back and rewatch? Let me load up my notes, Ty. There is something that I just gave more thought. I went back and rewatched Indiana and Washington, and it's obviously not representative of what Indiana truly can be without Curtis Rourke, who I think we agree is very good.
Yeah.
They will play one average or above average offense all year long this year.
Wow.
That's it. The best offense that they've played thus far. Do you have a guess? Do you know?
Indiana?
Yeah. The best offense they played is Maryland's, which currently sits at 65th in terms of points scored per drive, minus garbage time. And so they're playing great football. I believe they're the first team in however many decades to start out 8-0 without ever being down in a game. But I don't know. That's something to monitor as we move forward. They're only going to get Ohio State during the regular season in terms of a team with an above average offense, which is at its best pretty above average, to say the least. Sure. It just was striking to me that we don't really know what this Indiana defense, who have been excellent, and they were very good against Washington, obviously, opportunistic. Washington's is below average. UCLA's is obviously below average. Northwestern's is well below average. Michigan State they have coming up, both below average. It's just amazing that we don't have a specific data point that we have on most teams by Halloween on Indiana. Not to take away any of the results, just something I'm filing away.
I think that's fair, and I have an Indiana point that I want to bring up as well, because I did a little bit of digging.
Yeah.
But back to your point about Boise and UNLV. So I've been thinking a lot about, now that we're about to turn the page into November, what that G5 playoff spot looks like. And I think I speak for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
I am fascinated by how they're going to work this out. I am fascinated because it does have that feel, that old school BCS feel.
Yeah.
Where they're going to pick somebody, and that's going to be the team that gets into the spot. So I think right now we are probably in agreement, as are most people who follow these sorts of things, that Boise is that team. But if things go the way we expect them to go, and if it is Boise against UNLV to close out this season, I am very curious to see what would happen in an instance where Boise would lose. Because that would set up potentially either Boise or UNLV, depending on whoever the committee likes best, right? They would be 1-1 at that point against each other. Or the winner of the American, which could be Army. It could be Army, it could be Tulane, it could even be Navy at this point.
Right.
Those, I think, are the 5 teams with the most realistic shot to get into this thing. And so I do think it's going to come down to the wire. I do think it's going to come down to that championship week. And I think there's going to be a fair amount of drama on which of those G5 teams gets in. And this is where it's going to start to play in with margin of victory, how impressive do you look? You'll hear people talk about the eye test and things like that.
Right.
A lot more than you might if you're just talking about a school like a Texas or a Notre Dame, because the numbers maybe don't mean as much for some of the G5 teams compared to their power conference counterparts. I think it's going to get really, really interesting to try and chart this thing, especially now that it's kind of narrowed itself down. Like, we kind of have a pretty good idea where it's going to come from. I think it's coming from the Mountain West. I think it's potentially coming from the American Conference as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is, of course, to say that Washington State is also having a good year and they're ranked. I don't see them necessarily playing a factor in this at all because they're not going to be able to play for a conference championship. But I'm just really excited is where I'm going with this. I'm really excited to see how that shakes out.
Yeah. Interestingly, so there is another team that only has one loss that has a pretty great path to ending up 12-1, but they lost to Tulane, and that's Louisiana.
In the Sun
Belt.
Yeah, Louisiana. And I mean,
they did beat a power conference team in Wake Forest, barely. Yeah.
Liberty's probably going to have a great record by the time all is said and done, but that loss against Kansas State's going to kill them. Yeah, and it was already a bad schedule, so that's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, Louisiana's interesting. Their defense is pretty awful, but they're going to end up with a really nice record. And if Boise goes down to UNLV, I think you have to select one of those teams over Louisiana. Probably, Tulane is going to have an interesting case if Boise goes down.
Right. Their only two losses would be to power conference opponents. They have done well otherwise. It's a stronger case as a two-loss team than probably most of the other teams in this conversation.
Right. Army just needs to take care of business and beat Notre Dame. And then we don't have this conversation at all. Right?
Army can TCB.
Army can take care of business. And look, and you mentioned the losses that Tulane has. Tulane lost to one of the, best 4 or 5 teams in the state of Oklahoma? Easily. I don't know. Call that a take if you want, but I'm saying it right now. Continue.
Speaking of playoff.
Yeah.
So conference realignment has given us the gift of an 18-team Big Ten conference.
What a gift.
What a gift it is. As a result, we've got tiebreaker scenarios that are rather elaborate. They have to be, because not everybody can play everybody. I have been kicking the tires on Indiana a little bit because we're about to cross into November, and Indiana is 8-0.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a real shot at being part of this conversation, if not part of the whole system.
Yeah.
I went through a multitude of different possibilities here for the Hoosiers, but there's one in particular that is the most interesting. I think in the Big Ten, maybe in the sport as a whole. And the instance I'm talking about is there are potentially 3 undefeated teams in the Big Ten at season's end, which would be wild and unprecedented. And honestly, that's the best possible outcome for Indiana. Now, it assumes some stuff, which I'll get into. But in this scenario, because of the tiebreaker, we will be down to the 4th tiebreaker scenario. And because of that, which in effect is strength of schedule among conference opponents, in a scenario such as that, you end up with Oregon playing Penn State in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title, and you and I have to do some logistical planning and figure out if we want to go to that.
I agree.
But 3 undefeated teams, Penn State beats Ohio State this weekend, everybody else wins out. It'd be Oregon, Penn State, I believe, provided I didn't screw up this math.
Yeah, I think you'd have to look at weird common conference opponent winning
percentages.
percentages.
I spent 2 hours this morning.
And there's no possibility. I would be here for Oregon finishing 13-0 as the number 1 team in America and somehow not making the Big Ten.
Well, I looked into that.
Okay.
I looked into that, and I believe if I have done the math correctly, if my slide rule was properly calibrated.
What would they need?
In that scenario, what would occur is Penn State would be the team making it through via the strongest schedule among conference opponents. Penn State would have a tougher one, I think, by virtue of their game with USC.
Got it.
Oregon would be second on that totem pole, and Indiana would be by a hair third.
Okay, so there's no situation in which Indiana and Penn State can play for, short of Oregon losing a game.
What you're starting to look at then, if you're coming up with scenarios like that
Yeah.
is opponents that each team has unique from the others.
Right.
Okay. So there are a fair amount of teams that they've all played. Like they've all played, a handful of teams at this point, Purdue, as an example. You start to look at teams that are unique to that particular school's schedule, and then you start to root for odd results for that team, losses, things like that could upend the balance of, again, what amounts to strength of schedule for in-conference opponents. At present, if we assume kind of status quo, it'd be Oregon playing Penn State, but there are all sorts of possibilities within that. You do push up against the point, though, that I'm trying to make.
Okay, please.
Indiana going 12-0 and being left out of the Big Ten title game is absolutely the best possible scenario for the Hoosiers.
It's a good place for Indiana, yeah.
That's the best place. Frankly, it's the best place for any of these teams, okay? But for Indiana to get to 12-0, it would require them to beat Ohio State. It would also be helpful in this instance for it to occur if Penn State beat Ohio State. Frankly, it's the only way it could occur. But if this comes to pass, 3 undefeated teams, Indiana gets what amounts to a bye week before the playoffs even start. They could potentially get a home game, first round of the playoffs being so on campus.
Yep.
And they would not have to play against one of these two teams for a Big Ten championship, risk more injuries, risk a loss, how that might affect seeding, things of that nature. So if you're an Indiana fan, what I'd say is you're rooting like hell for Penn State this weekend, and you're obviously rooting for Indiana to not only beat Ohio State, but to win out, which easier said than done to beat Ohio State. I get that. But there's a real chance that it could happen.
I mean,
there's a real chance that it could happen.
Ohio State has never looked, not even because of their performance against Nebraska, but if you're talking about going into the final stretch of November as it gets colder, whatever, without an offensive line that seems to be of top 5 caliber, top 10 caliber at the moment, with how much Nebraska was able to sort of stuff Ohio State at times. Wow, that's an interesting conversation to be had.
It feels possible to me.
Yes.
It really feels possible to me that Indiana could win that game. I looked at the projections.
Yeah.
They're about a 13-point projected loser in that game as of now. I don't know what the point spread would be. It would probably be higher than that. But it is a year where it feels like there are a lot of teams with flaws. And so to that point on Ohio State, Dan.
Yeah.
What happens if Ohio State goes 9-3?
Just in terms of Ryan Day's job security?
In terms of anything.
Well, they're likely missing the playoff.
Oh, they would definitely be out of the playoff.
Yeah.
100% be out of the playoff. I don't think we can say if they lose this weekend at Penn State, they're for sure out because there's a lot of football to be played and things are still going to get weird.
So you're supposing a loss to Michigan and Penn State?
No, I'm supposing a loss in this scenario.
Yeah.
Kind of riding the coattails of this.
So Indiana and Penn State, which is not crazy. Those are two quality teams.
It's not crazy. So if that happens, Ohio State, I presume, is going to beat Michigan. Ohio State in that instance would finish 9-3. They wouldn't make the playoff. They would beat Michigan, so there would at least be that. But given the offseason, given the news of how much they were aggressive out there, not just hiring Chip Kelly, but in the portal with NIL, things of that nature.
Yeah.
A 9-3 season would drive people batty.
Okay, so I think this is a borderline farcical scenario.
Agreed. And look, I know I'm playing hype. Where's my hypothetical?
Yeah.
This is just a thought experiment, everyone.
But that whatever it is, $20 million number, however valid it is, and you're talking about ROI, not even making a 12-team field. In this universe, which I think is somewhat to very implausible, I don't know how you bring Ryan Day back. You shoved all the chips to the center for 2024, right? The expectation is that this year was a championship caliber year, let alone make the dance, make the field.
When we did our preview,
I don't know who you get, though. You better be positive you're getting somebody that is clearly better. Who are you getting?
I feel like we have these types of discussions every offseason.
I agree.
And most off seasons, there has been a big coaching change. Not as much the case last year, right? Beyond Alabama and Nick Saban, right? We have it every year. That's the point. But I don't know.
Again, Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell's going to go 11-1, 12-0 this year and use that to vault him to Columbus. I don't know.
Lance Leipold, does he want the job?
No.
I mean, look, here's the point.
Yes.
There was so much steam on this program when we did our preview back in the beginning part of August. And I think I even said it, I'm writing Ohio State into my playoff in Penn. It just felt like everything was set up for them. There's no way this couldn't happen. I agree. This is a long shot, what I am describing here.
This was their worst week by far.
This is a long shot. I am not projecting that this is what's going to happen. I still have Ohio State in my playoff.
Right.
If not winning the Big Ten as a whole. But the fact that we are at least having this discussion, I think speaks to where college football is at this year.
Yeah.
And why so many people are really intrigued by some of the possibilities we're seeing, not just in the Big Ten, but in the SEC and just abound in the sport. They lose to Penn State this weekend. It's going to be a little weird. Be advised.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? So I think it's Tribe Called Quest. Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario?
Right.
That's real cool. I sounded really cool doing that.
That was great.
Very authentic. Any other scenarios in any other conferences? I'm putting you on the spot here. There's a scenario that's super plausible in which Texas and Texas A&M play 2 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it would take Georgia and Tennessee each losing a second time, which
that's right.
Tennessee plays Georgia. Tennessee plays Vandy. Georgia plays Ole Miss. Georgia plays Tennessee. Like, plausible.
The SEC is, I've said this about other conferences, the SEC is in a complete blender.
Yes.
The SEC is in a complete blender. There's a very good shot you're going to have multiple one-loss teams. I mean, you already have multiple one-loss teams, but there's a pretty good chance that A&M dumps one, whether it's this week against South Carolina, whether it's last week of the year against Texas.
I agree.
It is tough sledding in the SEC week in and week out, and we've already seen that. There's a pretty good chance the entire top of that leaderboard has at least one loss, and we start talking about tiebreakers and stuff like that again. So I'm not really counting anybody out. I do think Alabama is in a very, very difficult spot to find its way back into things, but they do have a game left against LSU, right? That one could certainly play into things. There is going to be other action around the league that I think could scramble this a little bit further. They need to play better. I think they know that. But provided they continue to win, as they did this past weekend against Mizzou, there's a chance they could work themselves back into it, however improbable. The SEC is very interesting. The ACC, we've talked about the ACC a lot, and how that race is interesting as well.
Yeah.
The game this week, that game is on the ACC network. It's not even getting like national press. Pitt against SMU.
Oh, yeah.
That game is huge.
Killer.
That is a huge friggin' game this week that is going to tell us a lot about where things go in the ACC. The one that I would highlight, though, if you want to know other circumstances.
Scenario.
There is a slim but realistic shot of Colorado making the playoff as a number 4 seed with a first-round bye.
Yeah.
So if you're a Colorado fan right now, what you need is Iowa State to lose one of their next 4 games and then beat Kansas State in Farmageddon last week of the season.
Okay. Who does Iowa State finish out? I don't think it's crazy strong, right?
It's not bad. They've got 5 games left.
Okay.
Iowa State. Obviously, the hardest of all of those is that Kansas State game, which they close the year out with Kansas State. That game, by the way, just in case you're wondering, is going to be played at home in Ames. But this week against Texas Tech, they go on the road at Kansas, home against Cincinnati, on the road at Utah, then they close out against K-State.
It seems other than Utah, those teams are at least wild cardy. Any given week, they randomly explode and score, 47
Very
points.
wild cardy. Here's what you need, though.
Yeah.
Okay, you need Iowa State to lose a game, one of their next 4, and then beat K-State.
Okay.
Seems plausible. You also need to win all your games at this point. There's no wiggle room. Right now, there's about 11% chance that Colorado does finish 10-2. In this scenario, they get into the Big 12 title game, probably against BYU. And if they win that game, they qualify for the playoff as probably the 4 with a first-round bye. Now, which scenario do you think the networks would prefer? I think they would prefer Colorado to the other options that they've got right now.
I agree.
In the Big 12. That's not taking anything away from those teams. BYU also has a huge following, but Colorado has been, I think, much more of a national story over the last 2 seasons. So that is still on the table as a possibility. And if you go to bet on it, just to further the point, may seem a little far-fetched. Don't know where you stand on this. The odds right now are 6-1. You can get Colorado as a playoff qualifier at 6-1.
Okay.
Which is better than I think you might expect.
That's not bad. Can I give you an SC? While you were talking this, I realized there is a potential wrench / lil stinker in the SEC that both has the wrong side of a tiebreaker and has the potential to have the right side of some tiebreakers at or near the top of the SEC. That's the Hogs of Arkansas.
Yep.
Arkansas still has Texas and Ole Miss left?
Right.
Is that right?
Yep.
You're fact checking that? Yeah. Arkansas, they've got an offense. They also have Mizzou. Mizzou's not going to be in the SEC race. But having that plus Tennessee, I'm not saying they're beating. I'm saying there's a situation in which Ty has to buy a 10 by 10 foot whiteboard to figure out the SEC, and Arkansas is making him lose even more sleep than his puppies are at this moment.
Yeah.
Figuring out now Arkansas's win percentage against teams with a winning record. Arkansas has that potential, and what better program for there to be that ultimate wrench than the Arkansas Razorbacks? It'd be great.
Well, and Arkansas is also in a very, very interesting spot. They're 5-3 right now. They need one more win to qualify for a bowl, which I think against the schedule will be a very big deal.
Yes.
And they've got Louisiana Tech week 13. That should be number 6. But can they beat Ole Miss, Texas, or Mizzou to get the 7?
My answer is they can. Will they?
Absolutely can.
They have the ability. Of course they do.
They absolutely have the ability to beat one of those teams. Ole Miss and Texas are both in Fayetteville, for what it's worth. See what I mean? It's gonna get weird. They got Ole Miss this week.
Sorry, I have an appointment with YouTube TV to start filing away Arkansas games for my unlimited cloud DVR. Continue.
Not a sponsor. Could be.
Not a sponsor. Could be.
I did want to point out 2 SEC facts. It's not really related to any of these bizarro scenarios. But
okay.
We didn't talk a whole lot about the Oklahoma-Ole Miss game.
No.
That's a game that Ole Miss won 26-14. They trailed at half 14-10. Honestly, I thought the Oklahoma offense, at least for a half, looked better on the ground. Now, bear in mind, they fired their offensive coordinator the week prior, Seth Luttrell gone. They brought in, they promoted from within Joe John Finley to kind of call the plays, and Kevin Johns had a little bit to say there.
Mm-hmm.
We are starting to see, though, perhaps more clearly the problem with the offense. It's not a surprise if you've been following this team.
Right.
Hit a wall in the second half. Wasn't nearly as effective in the second half. 9 sacks allowed by this offensive line, most of which were coverage sacks. It wasn't like Ole Miss was blitzing the farm. They were just getting pressure with their defensive line, which is very good. But as we start to eliminate possibilities, perhaps, Seth Luttrell, nobody was crazy about the way he was calling plays, granted.
Right.
This might be beyond Seth Luttrell. This might come back to that offensive line, which was a question coming into the season and has persisted as a big question all year long.
Yeah, there's something about Oklahoma I've been thinking about for a while now. And we mentioned it a little bit in talking about Brent Venables and what does his network look like in terms of hiring assistants. Obviously, he also brought in Ted Roof to bring it full circle to the show when he started. I wonder if there's a little bit too much of, this guy's an Oklahoma guy. Got to have him, right?
Yep.
You keep on the offensive line coach. I think Joe John Finley is an Oklahoma guy who they retained. I want to say he came in a year before.
Right.
Seth Luttrell, Oklahoma guy. There is a little bit of, we'll hire you, Brent Venables, but we'd like to have a hand in who you hire, perhaps as, your first-time head coach. And I don't know, there's a lot of guys who just understand Norman, and we think that would be a really positive thing to have around you. And I hate saying this because I know the baggage it brings along. It feels a little bit USC-ish. We're like, ooh, this guy's a USC guy. How long has that been attached to bad hires and athletic directors? Like, there's that attachment. It seems. I'm guessing. I have no idea. I am always off on everything I think about. But as the Oklahoma guy, retain this guy, retain that guy, retain this guy. You're just like, I don't know if Brent Venables even had a shot to mold this program how he would have liked to. Or maybe this is his doing too. I don't know. But it seems like Sooner DNA is a little bit too intense around that program. And I wonder how much that set back Brent Venables' vision, if at all. I don't know. The injuries are worse, for sure. Offensive line injuries, receiver injuries, but I don't love that. He understands Norman. I don't love that.
Any other lingering thoughts for you before we get into our game of the week?
In life or just about week 9?
Whatever you want. If you want to talk cheese in this moment, we can talk cheese. We can save that for the latter stages of the show. I have real cheese packing questions that I think you need to answer for me before we engage in this.
Will that change the rating on this episode from standard to explicit? Your cheese packing questions? Is that a euphemism of some kind?
I certainly hope not. No. No.
I just wanted to tip the cap one more time to Jarquez Hunter, an absolute monster against Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do this every week. Our premium Verballers out of Verballers.com, along with their vote in the weekly poll, we ask them for their feedback on what we should talk more about. Brian wrote in, he wants us to talk about the things that have happened so far that are challenging some of our commonly held beliefs.
Oh, man.
At the start of the season. You and I thought about this one a little bit, and we decided we're going to call this segment the October Surprise.
God, I hate that! I got a surprise for you. Surprise.
October Surprise, Dan. What is this segment?
I mean, the surprise is that you included Jason Siegel's wiener in an audio drop, I guess. That's first and foremost. And I wasn't the one to do it. To put in a
I'm
weird...
hanging around you too much. Was it inappropriate? Should I not have done that?
No, it's fine, Ty. It's too late now. What are the surprises 9 weeks into the season? We can go conference by conference. We can go team by team. We can go magnitude of surprise. But magnitude of surprise, how should we order it?
I just think top of mind here. What are the things that jump out to you that have caught you by surprise now that we're basically through 2 months of the season?
Right.
It can be players, it can be coaches, it can be teams, it could be the ways that the new world order of college football is being received, score bugs if you want to go down that rabbit hole, whatever you're into, just surprises for you so far as we record this on October the 28th.
Okay, 1A and 1B for me, and whoever's your A, whoever's your B, it doesn't matter. Florida State and Indiana. Didn't have either of these things in those directions. I liked Kurt Cignetti. I liked Florida State heading into the season as maybe even a fringe playoff type team, depending on how DJU worked out. And I was not high on DJU. That was my big question. Like, I don't know if this guy is going to run a top tier playoff caliber offense. I did not see 1-7. That's a pretty big surprise to me. And conversely, liked Indiana's hire, liked the vibes about Indiana. Did not see undefeated at Halloween. Absolutely did not. And probably would have seen 4-4. 5-3, something like that, at their peak in my mind. If we were having this conversation in August, expected bigger things from UCLA. They're a disaster.
Can I take a knee and talk about Kentucky for a second?
Please do.
I really whiffed on Kentucky.
Yeah,
I whiffed badly on Kentucky. I wasn't the only one. There's a real chance Kentucky's going 4-8.
Yeah,
this season. There's only about a 9% chance of them getting back to 500 right now. At time of recording, 3-5. They've got games left at Tennessee, at Texas, and home against Louisville. The only surefire win left on this schedule is Murray State in 2 weeks. And it is surprising to me, that the offense has not taken flight at all. I just thought I thought it had to be better than this. The defense has been mostly okay, but the offense has just not generated any big plays. Brock Vandegrift has not popped the way that I thought he was going to. And so they have struggled mightily just to put points up on the board. I think taken in tandem with what we have heard from Mark Stoops and some of his post-game pregame stuff. I'm just wondering if they miss the bowl, and again, there's a 91% chance they're missing a bowl, if this is it for Mark Stoops. I'm wondering if he looks elsewhere. I'm wondering if they decide to part ways. He's been there forever.
I don't know. What's his buyout?
His buyout, something like $4 or $5 million, so it's definitely doable. But it just feels to me like things have gone sideways there in a very real way that I did not expect. That to me is a huge surprise, first and foremost. The first thing I jotted down when we started talking about October surprises, Kentucky maybe going 4-8 is like total mind-blowing.
I did not have the Big 12 beyond being high on Kansas State and Iowa State, and you were higher on Iowa State going into the season. I did not have the Big 12 pegged at all in this way. I had look at the bottom of this conference in Arizona, Utah, UCF, and Kansas, who I thought all the world of all of these teams are combined 4-16 in conference in this moment. Now, Utah, injuries. Arizona, coaching change. UCF, Ted Roof, handcuffing.
Sure.
Kansas loses an offensive coordinator. Did not have Kansas falling off like this. So Big 12-wise, Colorado being this good, definitely didn't have it. Thought they'd be improved from last year. Didn't have them in conference contention around Halloween. BYU, nowhere on my radar.
Look, whoa. We need to pause.
Please.
We need to take a knee and give BYU its due here.
Of course, I'm saying BYU was nowhere near the conference championship level to me in August.
We need to keep picking against BYU.
We should.
Because if we continue doing that and they finish 12-0, go to the playoff, then we could take credit for a reverse jinx,
It's win-win. You're either right or you're wrong and helpful.
I'm going to keep picking against BYU. I did hear from some BYU fans who kind of, they didn't want to say it aloud because we don't want to reverse any of the occult forces here that might be working in their favor.
Right.
So it was more of a wink and a nod, an assumption and understanding. I'm going to keep picking again. Every week I'm going to pick against them. Not this week, but they're on bye. Holy War, week 11, we're going to find a way to pick Utah. That being said, both offensively and defensively, this team has taken a huge stride forward. I'm looking at SP Plus numbers as compared to 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Their offense this year, 22nd overall. Last year, they finished 75th overall. Their defense this year, 36th.
Was that a Keaton Slovis most of the year last year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Defense was 94th a year ago, is 36th this year. They've taken a huge stride as far as that goes as well.
Okay.
This is a team that I feel continues to improve, continues to get better. Jake Retzlaff has been money. He doesn't have stats that jump off the page at you. And I remember having a conversation with you, with folks on Utah radio about how the quarterback situation was sort of up in the air. And when we did last year's shows, and they brought Retzlaff in for the first time, it was like they liked this kid, but he only completed 50% of his passes. It wasn't a great situation. There was a fair amount of concern as to whether or not he would stick as BYU starter. I think in the start of the year, we also thought it was going to be Gary Bohannon or somebody else starting for this BYU team.
Right.
As it were, Retzlaff gets the job. He has embraced the role. He has been effective as not only a passer where he has taken strides, he has literally taken strides in the rushing game as well and runs for some hard-earned yards. This is a kid who is powering this offense to a top 25 caliber unit right now. They do not win the same way others win. If you watch the games, it's a little bit of everything, but they are finding ways to get this done. And again, I reemphasize, they are getting better. It feels to me like each time I watch BYU, they're getting just a little bit better, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You have to go back to like week 2 or 3, that game against SMU when they scored 18 points. That was the last time truly when they undershot projections on the offensive side of the ball. So they have gotten better. I look at their projections the rest of the way. I mean, there are potentially some nail biters in here, but they right now on paper look like they are better than every team that remains on their schedule. So 12-0 BYU, maybe time to talk to our kids about it.
Maybe it's time to talk to your kids about bringing in Keaton Slovis, because every team that Keaton Slovis leaves immediately has a revelation on offense. Keaton Slovis leaves USC. In comes Caleb Williams Heisman. Keaton Slovis leaves Pitt. Yes. Maybe a year later. Took some time. There was the Phil Dracovic experience. A year later, in comes Eli Holstein and Cade Bell.
Right.
Keaton Slovis leaves BYU. In comes Jake Retzlaff and an incredible BYU season.
He's an agent of change, Dan.
He's
an
an
agent of change.
He's a cooler and a heater all at the same time. That was so mean towards Keaton Slovis, who's probably a good dude, and I apologize. It's all a coincidence, but wowza.
BYU, man. Yeah, BYU has been a huge surprise to me. Who else has been a surprise to you?
I mean, everybody. I overstudy and underdeliver with regularity in August. So I didn't have Arkansas having this kind of energy, even though it's been sort of a weird year for the Hogs offensively. They've been quite fun. I didn't see Talon Green. The ceiling of Talon Green I knew was there, but I think he's been more consistent, hopefully, than I thought. I thought Nico was going to be better, and obviously he's had higher ceiling moments, but I didn't fully have this Tennessee offense struggling for the stretches that they've had this season. I think you nailed the Kentucky thing. I don't think I thought Oklahoma would be better. I didn't have this.
Listen, I don't want to dunk on Oklahoma too much.
I think we've done enough of it. Yeah.
But let's talk about Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I was not high on Oklahoma State like you were high on Oklahoma State.
How low were you on Oklahoma State, though? Or did you have them 0-5 in conference?
I know early on I theorized as soon as you think they're bad, they're good. And as soon as you think they're good, they're bad. And so I think I was not in the 0-5 in conference camp, but I couldn't fully bring myself there like you could.
I was all in on this team.
Yeah.
I love their returning production. I like what they were bringing back. I had them in my Big 12 championship game against Utah. Looks like I whiffed on both fronts there. That's okay. A lot of people have.
Right.
This has just not been a good campaign. This has just been really bad. Their inability, I think, to recapture the Ollie Gordon magic has definitely come back to bite them, right? This rushing attack, we've talked about it for a good chunk of the season already. They are allowing a lot of big plays defensively. I really think while there's a lot of focus on the offense and Alan Bowman and, some of their own quarterbacking, what they've done on defense has left a lot to be desired.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a lot of red, frankly, on the spreadsheet. It's not been good, and that has definitely made it harder. I think Alan Bowman, for his part, has been okay, still throwing way too many interceptions, but better than the alternative.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's all on him. This has just been a big-time letdown for the Pokes this season, and it was gettable. It felt very, very gettable. The schedule seemed workable, especially now with what we know in hindsight of, Utah not being the Utah that we expected. Like, there was a lot that was there for this team, and as such, now they've lost 5 in a row. They're going into a week where they've got Arizona State coming to town. I believe ASU is a 1-point favorite in Stillwater. There's a chance they could lose at TCU. There's a chance they could lose at home against Texas Tech. There's a very real chance they could lose on the road at Colorado. I don't know where this team is at right now. I genuinely don't know where they're at, but they're 3-5. And there are some games coming up here that all look to me like they're losable.
Okay. I don't have anything to add to that. You're right. You're absolutely right. Can I give you a surprise team in another conference, or do you have more
please.
Big 12 thoughts?
Please.
Didn't have NC State giving up 352 combined points to Tennessee and Clemson. Definitely didn't have that on NC State's season. Losing to Wake, barely beating Cal. I mean, look, the Grayson McCall thing is certainly an element that he didn't work out. Obviously, the injury stuff was awful, and saw that he is retiring from football, and wish him the best as it looks like he's transitioning to a coaching career, which is great. Hope it is killer for him.
Definitely.
Didn't have this NC State. And there's the bright spot with CJ Bailey moving forward, and beating Cal is nice, but it seemed like all things were pointing towards this being an NC State 10-2-ish type year, given how they built and given how they finished last year. Did not happen. Here's an interesting surprise to me. Other than Indiana, if you had been presented this Big Ten standing sheet on August 28th from October 28th, you'd probably say, as you can pull it up, listener or Ty, you'd be like, this is kind of about right. Like, I understand that maybe I was high on Rutgers and it hasn't worked out, but that's not a crazy surprise that it didn't work out for Rutgers or Purdue. You look at it, you're like, well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of Indiana's the shocker, but everything else, you're like, it fell within like a couple standard deviations of expectations.
USC at 2-4 in conference, I think, is the one that jumps out. That one to me.
But were you crazy high on USC in August? I don't even remember.
I was higher than 2-4.
Okay, that's fair.
I thought they'd be better than this. I'm not surprised that there would be a little bit of bottoming out after you lose Caleb Williams.
But certainly after the LSU win, this is a surprising record for sure.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. But otherwise, I think that's fair. The Michigan one, I don't know if I expected Michigan to be this inept on offense. So they looked better last week.
Right. Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But to see Michigan sitting there at 5-3, 3-2 in conference, tied for seventh in conference, or tied for fifth, whatever this is in conference, that feels lower. It's just maybe I'm uncomfortable seeing them that low because they've been so good for so long.
Right.
I think that's a bit of a surprise as well. Another one that I don't know is a huge surprise, but I'd say for sure looking at Washington. Washington is record-wise about what I expected.
I think other than the Rutgers loss, I think Washington, and look, the Wazoo loss is not pretty if you're a Washington fan, but I don't know. I think it's about right considering all the changes.
I think they will be a grower here the remainder of the season. They'll end up higher.
Okay.
In the standings in the Big Ten. So I still think Washington's okay. But just given all of their turnover, it was hard to see it clicking right away.
Okay. Fair enough. Any other surprise? I mean, App State bottoming out? Didn't have that.
Dude, that's where I was going next.
Yeah.
I whiffed on that one bad.
Yep.
I was all in on App State. I had them in my playoff.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Absolutely had them in my playoff. App State, I think, is one. I was pretty high on Texas State, and Texas State is, granted, only one game out of the West.
Right.
In the Sun Belt. But
your chips were pushed in, yeah.
Yeah, I expected to see a little bit more. I was not ever high on the Jared Parker hire at Troy, as we've already described here. I did not expect that would be 1-7.
1-7, yeah.
This has just been sort of a disaster first campaign for Jared Parker at a program that has seen a lot of success.
One of the most consistent programs in America, regardless of conference, is awful this year in Air Force. I was definitely in on Air Force being at least a borderline threat to most teams that they were playing. No, sir.
Write in solidverbal@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know what surprised you so far this season. We'd like to hear more. You can, of course, always reach out to us on social media as well. We'd love to get your input. If you're a new listener, please chime in. Let us know your thoughts on this. Let us know how you found us. We care about those sorts of things. I've been reaching out to people here and there,
right,
just to get more details on how they found us this season. If you're new here, would welcome you to give us that feedback as well.
Yeah, agree.
Here's what it looks like the rest of the way, Dan. Obviously, we've got our Big Ten breakfast, which is going to drop on Friday morning. We've got our Week 10 preview episode, which will drop on Thursday morning. We are going to the Oregon-Michigan game, so the Saturday night episode is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
We're going to do our best to put something together and get it out there, since some people rely on that content late at night to make sure that they're up to date with what transpired. But
yes,
stay tuned to our social feeds. We will do our best to put together some express version of a show that you could react to.
Yes.
As for the Week 10 games, the big one is Ohio State, Penn State. It's a big noon game.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State -4 at Penn State. Got a bunch of other interesting ones. You got Texas A&M at South Carolina, a short point spread. You got Indiana against Michigan State.
Yeah.
Don't know what's going to happen in that one, if Curtis Rourke is going to be back.
Where is that game?
At Michigan State.
Okay.
Obviously, Oregon at Michigan will be at that one. We could provide boots on the ground coverage. We've got Florida versus Georgia. We've got Pitt at SMU. A handful of other games here that we're going to get into over the next couple days or so when we do our Week 10 preview episode. But would encourage everybody to make sure you hit follow or subscribe. And if you've already done so, leave a rating or review. Tell your friends. Again, we talk through some crazy scenarios on today's show. And there is a pretty good chance that it's going to get wild. Even if it doesn't get that wild, it's going to get weird.
Oh,
We'd love to have you here with us.
Speaking of which, by the way, if you see us wandering around in Ann Arbor,
yes,
whether
please.
it's beforehand, whether it's at the tailgate, I just want to be absolutely clear about something. I know it might be tempting. I know in your head you might want to say something, but Ty is happily married and he is not interested. Okay?
That's right.
I just want to I want to put that out in the universe now, because once you see him, you're going to say to yourself, "Oh my God, is that Ty Hildenbrandt? This is my shot."
Right. Yeah, I'm like Tom Cruise out there. Dan,
he appreciates it. He is flattered. He is happily married.
How am I going to do this cheese thing? How much cheese do you want? What is standard for you to take in a suitcase with you when you've done other kind of surreptitious
Do you think
exchanges?
I'm out here doing cheese exchanges with any old Tom, Dick, or Harry, Ty?
I don't know what you're into out there, okay? We connect virtually, but you never really know a guy.
Anytime I travel with cheese, it's only for myself. So I've never done this before.
Okay.
So let me say, as my phone is ringing, let me say, I don't know, how many slices is it come by the slice, or do you buy it by the block and slice it yourself, shred it yourself? What do you do?
I usually just get it from Wegmans.
I know, but is it pre-sliced or is it in a block?
I don't know if they'll sell me the block. When I've gotten it, it's been pre-sliced.
Great, that's fine. I'll take pre-sliced cheese. I don't know, dozen slices? Would that be crazy?
We work by the pound over here in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Well, whatever that. I don't know, Ty. Give me a pound and a half.
I'll get you a pound. I'll do a pound of cheese.
I'm bringing you a 5-pound bag. A frozen.
Now I got to up my game a little bit.
Well, this is just how it comes and the way I buy it.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Do you want me to keep it frozen or do you want it to thaw?
I don't know what I'm doing here. This is my first foray into.
Yeah, you're gonna need some room.
Airport cheese exchanges.
This is like the size of, I don't know. It's probably 18 inches by 12 inches or something like that. Maybe 4 or 5 inches deep. You just got to have room for it. Again, do you want it frozen or thawed?
I don't know.
Either way, it'll be chilled.
I have no idea how to answer that. Whatever you think is best, we'll roll with that.
We're going to do a cheese exchange and take a picture as if we are shaking hands at a treaty in a demilitarized zone. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. That's it. Pound and a half. That'd be great for me. How many slices would be in a pound typically? 10 or 12?
Pretty many. No, there's more than that.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Pound of cheese is great.
Okay. On that note, thank you for downloading, for listening, for supporting. We will talk to you all on Thursday when we do our Week 10 preview episode. Don't forget to check out verballers.com and further support our cheese habits here on the show. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hillenbrandt, we will talk to you all soon. In the meantime, enjoy your week. As always, stay solid.
Peace.